In addition to the video today, where we're talking a little bit more about the story, about the new map, Draconis Mons, the Druids, and all the good stuff that's going on there, it's also Tuesday, and it's a Tuesday shortly after the patch, of course, which was Flashpoint fairly recently, and that means it's balance time. So a couple of months have passed since the previous big balance patch. Generally, ArenaNet have been doing better each go around, though that doesn't seem to be stopping the vast quantities of dim-witted vitriol we find angrily touted around the forums and the subreddit. But today I wanted to talk a little bit about the changes that have come in, a little bit about the skill balance. So of course we have had other various changes since Flashpoint came out, fixes to various things. I think right now the new backpack, which you can grow and build as of this patch, is still bugged and people are a bit disappointed in that. But there have been a lot of other changes to Okart's Essence, changes to achievement radiuses, and all kinds of other things like that, which we won't get into the nitty-gritty of. So there's also been a general change too, which I don't think anyone watching this video will be affected by. I wonder if this is in prep for the next expansion. It seems to do nothing but lose the devs money, really, but probably something to do with bot accounts, I guess, or fraud with people's cards, I don't know. But newly created accounts, as you can see here, must wait 72 hours before gems to gold transactions can be completed on the currency exchange. So 72 hours before you can do that. None of us are going to be getting new accounts anytime soon, unless when the next expansion comes out, we're buying them for friends, families, or alt account purposes. But there you go. The fact that legendary armor was salvageable for a little while was something very funny. It reminded me very much of salvaging old expensive GW1 skins, and they tweaked that in this patch too, as well as adding some new recipes to the pack supply network, which is cool. All right, so let's get into the balance patch itself. The devs explain this. They say in this update, you'll see some changes aimed at normalizing how certain types of skills work. Skills that tether players, and this is a pretty big one, will now apply revealed to provide a stronger window of opportunity to players who can successfully land them. So tether abilities, when I first read this, I mistakenly thought it was stuff that, you know, roots you. But tether abilities are stuff like Tainted Shackles from the Necromancer, the core Necro 5, you know, where you get these binds that go out and connect you. The Druid also has some shackle stuff on one of its glyphs, I believe. We've got the Guardian F1 that is also shackling ability. That stuff all applies reveal now. And it's curious because Druids can shackle onto their allies. Presumably they're not going to reveal their allies, right? But I think it works. I mean, if you're connected to someone, it only makes sense that they shouldn't be able to stealth during that. And I have enjoyed over the past year or so seeing ArenaNet expand the places that revealed logically can be used in skill balance, so that's kind of cool. Another big one that they've done is skills and traits that previously granted pulsing stability will now just grant a block of it up front in order to better allow for counterplay through boon removal. This patch also, as I'm going to explain in a second, did a lot to the PvP sigils, and you guys might recall a while back I talked about the devs were looking for feedback from that on the forums. That's now gone through, and so the sigils that remove boons now are slightly stronger. That goes hand in hand with that rework, but also any kind of boon removal sources, I suppose. So if you think about something like the old Plague Form, and Plague Form's had a big change in this patch, so it's not a great example anymore, but Plague Form used to, you know, refresh a bit of stability on you over and over and over again. That would now just be a big lump sum, and if it gets boon removed, it all goes away at once. This also isn't just boon removal. Now, the devs don't talk about it, but it also allows people more visibly strip through just, you know, using CCs and stripping stacks of stab, which could be more relevant in places like world versus world. Obviously, any kind of stability change like this will have a big effect over on that game type. And then they say, finally, we are increasing the casting time of many skills that do apply CCs, like daze or stun, in order to give players on the receiving end more time to react and defend. So yeah, if you run a build where you love having lots of pulsing stab and you're upset by this, also consider that a lot of the abilities that would be stripping that stab are also more counterplayable, more dodgeable, more blockable, more whateverable now. So I think generally that's a swing in a positive direction. I never really liked the pulsing stab stuff, or where it is a pulsing stab effect, I think it should be really specific, and that should be a major perk of it. So I kind of like this change. Here's a big change that's kind of controversial. A lot of the unnecessary saltiness I'm seeing about this patch comes from this change, and it's not that it's not justified, it's just that I kind of view us as going into a temporary weird place. This patch, guys, you might not be familiar already, but across many different areas of Guild Wars 2, Condi builds have really been running up and giving power builds a run for their money. There's kind of this very old classic idea of Guild Wars 2 is all about Zerk, 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 and this idea that it's purely a Zerk meta. Now, that hasn't been true for ages, but if any patch has really substantially shifted that, even after all this slow creeping of Condi, it's this one, because there's been a big change to power foods. So let's listen to what ArenaNet says, and I'll give you my take. They say this: Consumables. The line of foods that provided damage bonuses while moving have been dominating consumable use for all power-based builds, in addition to being significantly more powerful than any other foods designed to boost power damage. The wiggle strategy to maintain uptime on its effect has a negative impact on the health of the game and its players. For these reasons, food that increases outgoing damage while moving has had its efficacy reduced by 50%. This affects the following items and their respective feasts: bowl of seaweed salad, winterberry seaweed salad, swiftly scrambled eggs, and down and down and down and down and down. So there's a few things to get to here. Now, number one, this is a good move. This is a good change, guys, because honestly, the wiggle method of having to constantly be tapping A and D, A and D, A and D, moving left and right when you're raiding, when you're doing whatever, and specifically this is more of a high-end PvE problem, right? This sucked, and it was a really lame, really shallow way, in my opinion, for the devs to make it look like their game was more fluid and movement-oriented than it actually was. Now, I've already seen a fair share of people saying, oh, now the game is less skill-based. Come on, this wasn't skill. This was just autopilot annoyance and finger ache, if anything. And it was frustrating to have to deal with all the time. I absolutely agree with this nerf. I think these foods, for what it's worth, are an interesting idea, but practically speaking, what they could be is a really big damage boost that, in an ideal world, would only affect abilities that move you as that you're using them. So in a perfect world, seaweed salad would be a massive buff to stuff like Surge of the Mists, for example, or abilities like Eviscerate that have leaps and movement on them. But obviously that's not how it ended up working in the engine, and I think that they have really bogged the game down a bit. I'm looking forward to being able to play and focus on the mechanics of the encounters that I'm up against and the nuances of how my build actually works, instead of constantly having to tap A and D all the time. I like this change. However, this has had an inadvertent effect of something that can be quite bad, and that's that now, essentially, every power build out there in Guild Wars 2 right now has had a pretty significant damage nerf. They're all a lot weaker, and when you compare that to condition builds, which weren't running this food anyway, condition, which already was, as I say, giving power a run for its money, conditions are really ahead of the game here now. So this has been a pretty big nerf to the power builds, and they haven't had anything to compensate for it. So I can totally understand that being a bit sucky, but I sort of view it as a transient thing. I view this as something that we'll just deal with for a little while, and then, you know, they'll rein in condis, or they'll start compensating the power builds on the next balance patch, and it's just, you know, the next chapter we move into. What's important is that this really arbitrary, kind of annoying food that we were dealing with is now gone. And it does also open up more diversity for the power foods, depending on exactly what build you're running. So I like this. I think it's good. The one thing that I'm a little curious about is there is definitely an 8% while moving food that you can get in Cursed Shore, and that doesn't appear on the list here that they've nerfed it, and so I'm guessing that just like with the Frost Gun, for example, the devs might have forgotten about it, and we might see people just using that Cursed Shore food for a while. We shall see. Speaking of the Frost Gun, there was a change to this. I like seeing the Frost Gun stuff in these patch notes because I do kind of feel responsible. So the Frost Gun, they say that the bundle item obtained from Researcher Bam has had its skills reworked. What those reworked skills are, we don't know. So those out of the loop, I did a video talking about insane synergy for the open world with this and Reapers. They disabled it completely, and now it's been re-enabled, apparently. I don't know what the new skills are, but presumably they're a lot worse than they used to be. Hopefully there's still something fun about the gun. But yeah. Also, some other changes too. We saw very recently that a lot of Condi players started getting to grips with the fact if you were a Sylvari, you could run Take Root, and it was just kind of a damage bump for you. ArenaNet don't like the racial skills having any purpose in this game, and so they have nerfed the bleed duration on not just Take Root, but also the Seed turret as well, which was also Sylvari based. That was only a matter of time before that was going to happen, and this has finally been the patch. So I suppose the Condi builds got a little bit of that, but hey, it wasn't that prevalent. So there you go. Those are the general changes. I'm curious what you guys think. Hopefully I've sounded reasonably balanced when it comes to the power food discussion. I used to be, for what it's worth, a big fan of the movement-based foods, but they were wildly stronger than the other ones. They do dwarf the other ones, and ultimately, once you've played a certain amount of Guild Wars 2, they're just kind of annoying to deal with, so I'm happy to see the back of them. And the nerf they went with, about halving their efficacy, might seem really crazy, but they were that much better than the other foods. So yeah. All right, let's go into specific professions. Let's talk about some of the changes, and they start with Elementalists, which is a character for years that I have been very, very familiar with. I actually like a lot of these Ellie changes. Their general description here is that they say, in this iteration, there have been a couple of reworks for less used utility skills and a couple of general quality of life changes. They're also saying that in PvP, they're looking to slow down Elementalist defensive capability so it has more openings for opponents to pressure them. So with Elementalists here and all the other classes upcoming, I won't go through every single change. That would be way too much. As fascinating as all these differences are and the amount of discussion we can add on them, it's just going to take us way too long. So I'll pick the really big ticket items that I care a lot about. First of all, Rebound. All game modes, the base healing of this ability has been increased by 33%. Guys, that's huge! You might remember when the Nightmare Fractal came out, I talked about supporting in Fractals with an Ellie. I talked about how amazing Rebound was in that situation. Rebound is like a skill I detest in some respects, and it's a skill that I really enjoy in others. It is crazy. That's a massive buff, and I'm really excited to play around with that. There was a pretty big change to the Glyph of Elemental Power. I really don't know what the devs are doing here. It's essentially a different skill now. So before this patch, Glyph of Elemental Power was something you could pop, and then it gave you a chance to inflict conditions with your abilities. And depending on the enchantment you were in when you originally cast it, it's a glyph, don't forget, it would change the condition you'd apply. So if you originally activated it in Earth, you'd be crippling people with your stuff. Perhaps useful in certain game modes and certain places, but mostly people would activate it in Fire because it would give you really good burning. And it was nice for burn Ellie, it really was. But I guess the devs didn't like this, so they've reduced its recharge, and now it just works totally differently. Now it gives you 5 charges, and as you use your abilities, those charges are unloaded. So this is a lot like, if you're an Ellie player, how Arcane Power worked. Except it's, instead of guaranteeing you crits, it's giving you condis. So it will burst like 5 burn on someone, for example, or a reasonable amount of cripple on them. But with the way that cleanses work on condis, I don't really know whether I like this at all. It just feels weird and the cooldown feels too long. Maybe later we'll get like a Glyphomancer elite spec that shares the passive of Glyph of Elemental Power out to people or something. I don't know. But speaking of that and Arcane Power, another really crazy change. Arcane Power, listen to this, guys. The effect of, so Arcane Power before this patch, if you guys don't know, it was an ability the Elementalists would activate. It would give them charges, 5 charges, or was it 6? And it meant your next abilities were guaranteed critical hits. And I used to use a lot of this skill. It's never been a particularly favored skill out of the Elementalist repertoire, but I used to really love this skill and use it a lot, especially in PvP with like quick snap Phoenix bursts and, you know, very heavy, spiky, glassy builds. In World vs. World, like little rooms as well. I loved Arcane Power. It would guarantee you'd score certain kills that you would otherwise have a little bit of RNG on because you might not crit everywhere you could. So obviously for PvE and raiding and stuff, everyone's usually at 100% crit chance anyway, and it had limited use. But the devs have changed it now, right? So it will still guarantee crits, but what they're saying is it now also applies to your allies. So it's kind of like a Venom, right? It's like an Ellie Venom, kind of, even though it's supposed to be arcane. And in addition to it, people who are under the effects of it, each stack gives them 75 ferocity. So when you put this on your allies, you've just bumped your allies' ferocity really high. Now, when they start attacking, or if they're rolling lots of damage, those stacks will quickly fall away. right? And so don't think of this as like some really absurd strong version of the Revenant trait, which gives everyone higher ferocity, because this disappears very quickly. So where you really want to think about this is like insane for burst squads in World versus World. Imagine roaming around with a couple of thieves and you're on a bursty Ellie, and the thieves are covering stealth on you, and you're using Arcane Power to guarantee they're going to get some nasty spikes. And not only those spikes of damage guaranteed as crits, but they're higher spikes of damage than they'd have otherwise because they've got all this ferocity. So it's like this really kind of ganky, small little roamy thing. Could have interesting synergies with like kill shot warriors and stuff. Very, very curious, and puts Ellie into a fun place there. I'm really interested in that. Almost makes me sad that if you guys remember in the olden days on Ellie, we had a trait that when you got low on health, it would automatically trigger Arcane Power for you. I think that trait's been deleted now, but wow, imagine that under this version of the skill, Jesus. And so the final big Ellie change that I want to pick at is a change to One with Fire. So One with Fire is a trait in the Fire line, as you might expect, and it's not something support Ellies really run right now. But what it is it means that when you apply a Fire Aura, it will last longer and it will apply might. And so there has been a weird idea of an Auramancing Ellie who runs fire instead of, say, earth. So the earth Auramancer gives everyone protection and is incredibly strong for that reason. But if you ran a fire one instead, you could essentially like might stack for people by running One with Fire, and you could put out all these fire fields as best you can and fire auras as best you can, and you could try and like almost be like a healing phalanx strength elementalist equivalent kind of thing. But it has never quite been potent enough to justify the slots. Well, they've changed One with Fire, and it means that now every aura in the game you apply will also give 1 stack of might. So that's huge. That means you can be a very potent might stacker now, and with very good quality of life, as some kind of Auramancing Ellie who instead of goes for protection, you go for fire. This is really cool, and this is what I think specialization should always have been able to do. So I'm very excited to see just how strong that is, and how much might you can very comfortably maintain on your group while being a dedicated support. If you think, guys, about the changes in the recent patch where they made banners 10-man. Essentially, what this means is you can kind of run, maybe in some compositions, just a single warrior, and you can have like a support Ellie who's picking up the might for the second subgroup. I don't know, there's space for some interesting things. I think that's really, really fun and something I'm keen on playing around with. So there you go, that's Ellie. As you guys know, I played a lot of Ellie, so I might spend a bit more time on that than the other classes. Let's pick at the big things from other areas. Let's go to Engineer, which is next on the list, and I take some credit, perhaps, for what we read here. You guys might remember I did an assessment of Power Engineer recently, and one of the big problems I talked about with Power Engineer is just how bad the turrets are, and the fact that the tool belt skills get replaced with detonate turret once you use a turret, so you're being encouraged not to use your main mechanic, and it's just this terrible, bizarre thing. Well, check this out. What do the devs say? Most of the time, engineers were still taking turret skills and never deploying the turret because the tool belt skill was too important to be overridden by the detonate turret skill. In this update, we are moving the detonate skill to be the flip over for the turret itself so that the tool belt is always available even if you deploy the turret. Because many of the overcharged skills weren't very tactical anyway and much easier to just press on cooldown, we've changed these skills to automatically activate the moment the turret is placed instead. Since this means a turret can only be overcharged once per deployment, we've also reduced the recharge of a few turrets to compensate. Whew, so there's a lot to get through. First, this is kind of a buff for Power NG because they can now drop their rifle turrets and keep spamming surprise shot, which is cool, I guess. And maybe depending on your game mode, there's different quality of life that you'll get out of that. So it's kind of a buff. Balance that with the fact that you have lost your Seaweed Salad, though. So it kind of, you know, it's not the greatest thing in the world. You're not going to be, you know, pushing higher numbers necessarily than you were before. But this is something engineers, far longer than I've been an engineer, have been desperately asking for. It's very cool. I think a lot of people will be happy with this, but it does kind of come with a downside. First downside is kind of a flavor one. Engineers sort of lost some skills here. You will never see the icons for those overcharged skills anymore. And there was some play to some of those overcharged skills. Sure, like the supply crate one, there wasn't much play to. But if you think about, like, the heal turret, there was a bit of play sometimes to overcharging that, like, frequently, like, over and over again in an established area to get as much cleanse off of it. It was very rare, and practically speaking, shouldn't matter too much. But there was some play to that. And here's the other thing as well. The rocket turret, the overcharge on the rocket turret isn't always a good thing. What it is it's big CC, but it also changes the trajectory of the rockets from being in a straight line to these whopping great arcs. So in a weird way, this is kind of a nerf to rocket turret here. Because it's not actually as useful, potentially, when you're overcharged, depending on the situation and what you want to get out of it. Then there's another little thing as well. Apparently, they don't overcharge as fast as you could have before the patch if you'd manually tried to overcharge it instantly. And that does have an impact on blasting in the water field that's produced by the heal turret, which is a very standard thing that a lot of NGs do. So there's a lot of weird little things to think about here. But I think overall, it's a good idea. It's a good change. And I'd like to see them just continue pushing turrets. Now maybe actually buff what the turrets are capable of in PvE, as they've been left down on the field because they are basically just pea shooters. And we'll be looking at something cool. There were some other changes to NG. Gyro buffs. I don't play very much Scrapper, but I'm sure people will be excited about those. The gyro buffs are pretty cool. And lastly, pretty crazy too, another buff to the supply crate is the tool belt version, the med pack drop, which you can drop into an area and it will put all these packs down. This now will, as you drop it, cleanse all conditions from 5 targets in that area. That's mental. Like a pure, complete cleanse of everyone in that area. I think that is going to be really huge and really cool for World vs. World, because in World vs. World, you really want to run around with a mortar, and this is a great reason now, especially with the balance and the strength of Condis in World vs. World Zerg fights, to maybe look a little bit more at running the supply crate instead. So I love that balance, and maybe in PvE one day as well, we'll have enough Condis being thrown at us that could be an interesting part of the skill. It's kind of a buff to support NG, which is its whole thing. But yeah, so those are the NG changes. Moving on, we've got Guardian. Guardian, they're saying basically signets are the main thing that they're looking at here. Signets are actually quite interesting when you look at very supportive Guardians. I'm not sure we saw enough change here for them, unfortunately. Along with the many signet changes, which also, by the way, affected Condi builds a little bit, I think. We did have the aforementioned change to Spear of Justice, which will now reveal people if you can tether someone with it. That's going to be really frustrating as a thief, like when you're running around in World vs. World, you stealth, but they've already thrown the spear and you're invisible, but the spear will track to you and then it will tether and reveal you. That's going to be pretty damn frustrating, but I'm sure we'll find a way to get around it. Really not too much for Guardian. I think I'd probably be a little bit disappointed if I was one, but there you go. Moving on, we got Mesma. You remember that in a recent skill change, they looked at all the Phantasm skills and gave them, like, instant effects on top of summoning the Phantasm. And I gotta say, I still don't understand why they're doing it. Mesma is so much visual noise and so much clutter and so much mess. And it's like, you know, a skill can be a Phantasm and summon a Phantasm and already be crazy and interesting enough on its own instead of having to do all this extra stuff. But, I mean, they're buffs and people always love buffs, right? So they've gone further with this and they've started giving more Phantasms than you'll recall that the Duelist, for example, got an extra projectile on it last time. So the Phantasmal Berserker, now when you cast that, you fire a boomerang projectile, so it'll go out and it will come back in and it hits people and stacks Vuln. What they're trying to do is buff Power and Shatter Mesmas, which have fallen out of favor. They say recently, but Power Mesma has not been in favor and as beautiful as it was, you know, back in the early days for a long time now. So that's the Berserker. The Swordsman now will perform a sword strike at the start, and if it hits something, then it will give you 8 might, and all the other swordsmen you already have up will get 8 might. That's going to be very curious to see if people start looking at that more in PvP. And probably the most exciting one of all to me is the Warden. This actually throws something that immobilizes people. So the Warden, if you guys don't know what this is, it's the focus one that swirls and actually does reasonable damage. And so that now immobes people and helps people to stay into the effect of the Warden spinning around, which is great. The Rogue, which is your downstate one, also got the same treatment, and you get a little attack that puts confusion and vuln on as well before the Rogue tries to backstab someone. The underwater ones, the Whaler and the Mariner, got them just all around crazy stuff. Then for the actual power spike stuff too, they've just been buffs, right? So Mind Rack, which is your big shatter, the F1, that's had a 4% increased damage on each little packet of damage that goes out on it. The F2 has got a 15% bump. One of the traits, which means you do more damage to inactive foes, has been buffed to 50% more damage against inactive stuff, but that's only in PvE. I wonder how that's going to affect bosses and things. I'm very curious about that. And so yeah, just generally lots of big power changes for Mesma. Every power build really got a bit of a nerf this time, but I think Mesma came out of it doing pretty well, all game types considered. So there you go. Moving on to Necro. Necro essentially has a new skill this patch, guys. Very cool, and a replacement of Plague Form. So let's listen to this. First, they're talking about Epidemic, and they say, our biggest focus in this iteration for Necros was that of Epidemic. Its impact is 2 instants in most PvP scenarios, as well as its heavy toll on our servers. Secondarily, we felt long that Plague Elite was lackluster and was in need of a rework. In addition to a variety of weapon-based quality of life changes, we're excited to see how the skill changes fare over time. So, you guys will recall before, for World vs. World Epidemic issues, they did that very smart and cool change where if you epi someone who currently has resistance on them, it won't do anything, which I thought was very cool. But they're pushing it further. So let's just see what epi does now, right? This ability now fires slow arcing projectiles from its initial target up to 5 in range. Foes that get hit by the projectiles will gain all conditions from the original epi target. Projectiles strikes are unblockable, but cannot critically hit. So I must admit, and I defer to the comments here, guys, please set me right. I must admit, I am still unclear on this. The fact that they're unblockable, does this mean they are also undeflectable as well? Because I swear I've had so many discussions over the years and never quite settled on what this is. If you were to make a projectile unblockable, does it mean that it will go through a swirling winds now? Does it mean it can be going through feedbacks and stuff? I'm not quite sure how that interaction works, and I feel like I should know, but it strikes me that if that does work, then Epi might still have a bit of a place, but otherwise, especially in places like World vs. World, you've got so much projectile mitigation going on anyway. I don't know, it will hamper it a lot. For the PvE players, if you're thinking about, like, you know, Epi bouncing in raid bosses and stuff, I think that's still totally possible and it's still there. It's just even more skill-based now because you've got to watch for when the projectile lands, and there's actually a bit more play to it. You can precast for your second Epi right before the projectile lands and stuff. So it should still be possible. And yeah, I like that they were very upfront that, hey, look, this isn't just a design thing, it's a server thing as well. But of course, I think some people are going to be upset because Epi was one of those really defining fun things about being a Necro. So let's turn it around then. Let's look at some other things. So yes, Tainted Shackles. The core Necro, Shroud 5, now has reveal on it. So this is a really interesting change to me. Very interesting, because this really represents something that you lose by going Reaper now. To all of those of you out there who don't like the idea that elite specializations are straight up better than other, you know, core specializations, or running 3 core specializations, well, look, you've got something there. That's, you know, that's definitely something you lose by going Reaper. Having reveal on core Necro Shroud gives core Necro Shroud a very well-defined place, in my opinion, there. So that's very cool, even if it was only for, you know, a flavorish kind of reason. It sounds like they did it. There were also several changes to axe abilities. Again, more vulnerability. It now does more damage based on the amount of vulnerability enemies have. The skill 3 doesn't do retaliation anymore, but it does like a double strike if someone's low on health. Axe was already getting really up there in PvP, and while we still won't see power necros running this thing like in PvE, I'm even more keen to try out a power necro PvP side. But here's the thing that I think everyone in all the game types will be very interested in, at least, and that's the change of Plague. So Plague Form, the devs say that they didn't even like very much, which is curious to me because I've always thought it was a very interesting elite skill. Using that to secure stomps and to hold nodes in Conquest and stuff, it definitely had its place. But so they've basically got rid of Plague. Plague is now a different skill altogether. It's got a different name. I don't know whether it has the same icon. I haven't looked yet. Hopefully the footage in the background will show you guys this. It's called Plague Lands. Ooh. So let's listen to this. This skill creates a 240 radius corrupted area at the Necromancer's initial location for 10 seconds. After 1 second, it pulses damage and conditions in that area for 9 seconds. Each pulse will apply a new condition, and each pulse applies all the previous conditions from before it. Conditions applied in order are this: bleeding, poison, torment, vuln, cripple, weakness, blind, chill, and burning. Recharge is set to 120 seconds. Okay, so there's a lot to get through here. First of all, this is essentially a well now. So that's opened up some weird stuff, because plague form before this patch was known as a corruption. It was in the corruption skill category. Well, now it's totally not. In basically every sense, it's a well. So does it deserve to have its tag swapped? As you guys might know, Necromancer doesn't have an elite well. Well, this is totally it, right? So does it deserve to be changed? Well, you got the other idea as well then of thinking of traits. So the well traits wouldn't really be that amazing, honestly, for plague lands. But then what do the corruption traits do? Well, I believe there's only one. There's Master of Corruption, which drops your recharge down. So it might be 120 seconds, but it's going to go 33% lower if you trait for it, which is a pretty big drop. But then also you're going to be applying bleed and poison to yourself at the same time. I don't know, it's just interesting to think of the way that they've categorized that and whether maybe that deserves a look over. But so let's get into the nitty gritty of how this will work. So it will land and it will put bleed on someone, which yay, we want to do condition damage, right? That's cool. Then on the second pulse, it will put bleed again, because it always does the earlier condition, and then it will go poison. And then on the third pulse, it will go bleed again and poison again. So now you're at 3 bleed and 2 poison and torment. And on the fourth pulse, it'll be even more deadly. So you got to think about this from the perspective of, say, being in PvP or being in World versus World. If you walk onto a plague lands at the end of the animation, it's going to really bomb you with condies. And so you might notice here as well that the devs very cleverly put the damaging conditions as the first ones that roll in, because they're the ones that are going to be so much stronger. And even more cleverly, they kept blind quite near the end, because blind on its own is already very strong, but Necros can combo blind into chill and then chill into bleed as Reapers, right? So they've left that kind of near the end, but that's even more bleed towards the end. So once you hit that blind threshold, you're really pushing a lot of condies out. And then they've got chill after that as well, which again will combo with you as a Reaper. And they left burning at the very end, because they don't want burning to be something, you know, super major. It will be basically one burning tick that you get there. Really cool ability. I don't know what the animation looks like as I go through the patch notes here with you guys, but I should have footage of it going on in the background there. If it's got a badass animation to boot, then I think this is a fun, essentially new elite that Necros get to enjoy as of this patch. Pretty cool, right? Let's move on. There's a lot more we could have said about Necro. There's a lot we could have said about all of these, but let's go on, because we're already half an hour into the video here. Let's go to Ranger. The devs say this, that condition rangers have been pretty potent, largely on the strength of torch skills and quick draw. We'd like to preserve the tactical play of quick draw, so we're nicking bits of burn duration from torch skills at this time. And while we're at it, we've taken the opportunity to revisit a few older weapon traits for short bow, axe, and sword to grant them a bit more synergy with the core weapon skill function. So if you guys don't know what quick draw is, this is a Grandmaster Ranger trait. It's a very fun trait. It means that after you weapon swap, the first weapon skill you use will recharge really quickly. And so you get some very cool rotations, like the elegance of the rotations when it comes to Condi Ranger, I think is really fun because of quick draw, right? So there are a lot of basically little changes going on with the Ranger. Here we see a pullback with some of the Condi damage. Maybe not totally justified, as I think people are finding out a lot of Condi builds are a lot stronger than they previously realized, especially since pinpoint distribution came in. Like Condi Thief, though it's limited in the encounters it can do, say, is actually quite insane in a lot of respects and didn't get a similar treatment. They changed Refined Toxins. They've reduced the effective cooldown by half, and then they've also reduced the required health threshold from 90% to 75%, so it's a lot more accessible now. I found Stratis defense change to be pretty interesting too, in that this is the one that meant that as you attacked on Greatsword, you had a chance to destroy projectiles, but now it's got a new functionality. It's that when you evade, you get quickness for 3 seconds. I'm not sure what the ICD is on that, if there is one, but that's a lot of quickness for Ranger there, a lot, and I think that's kind of cool. Well, move hastily on here. Oh my god, there's so much left to read. Sorry to the Ranger fans and the fans of the other stuff coming up. We have to go a bit quicker here. So, Revenant. Revenant got some really cool changes. I was literally just whining about Condi Rev and the place it's been in ever since they changed it from its beta state. Well, listen to this. They say some of the core trait lines of Revenant have been lacking in either synergy or uniqueness. In particular, the Malix legend and the associated corruption trait line aren't up to snuff. Further exacerbating this, there's a lack of synergy from other trait lines. As a result, we've reworked and tuned up some of the traits in Invocation and Corruption to offer more condition-centric Revenants. Additionally, we've selected a few places to make small effects on condition-applying skills. And we're reworking the Ventari Tablet Energy Expulsion to give it a stronger place in large group support. So basically, Ventari Tablet, they've just given a lot more cleanse as far as I remember. So this is very cool. Now, I know a lot of power revs really want their power builds to be buffed, but I would say that the Condi stuff is very lackluster and definitely did deserve higher priority. So I'm very happy with this. Essentially, there's just a butt-ton more torment. Some people are saying, oh, it's not enough. I'm not actually sure whether we can say it's not enough yet, and especially not within 5 minutes before taking to Reddit and crying about it. There are a lot of changes here. These Revenants are now getting access to slow through Frigid Blitz. A lot of their invocation options have opened up for both Condi or power builds now, instead of just being purely focused around crit chance, crit chance, crit chance, crit chance, crit chance stuff. They've got, like, for example, an entirely new trait here, right? They've replaced Frigid Precision, which I think was just higher crit. It was a chance to apply chill on crit, right? They replaced that with something called Abyssal Chill. Abyssal Chill sounds awesome, all right? This is essentially a Revenant equivalent of the Reaper's Bitter Chill. So Reapers apply bleed when doing chill. Revenants can now apply torment when doing chill. So the Reaper one is a Grandmaster trait, which gives you 3 stacks of bleed. This one is not a Grandmaster trait. For the Rev, they don't get in the Grandmaster slot, so it's not quite as strong. But that is huge. Torment whenever you chill someone. I shouldn't need to remind you guys that there are foods that mean during night, is it? Or during day, you apply chill on all of your crits. There's some wild builds that can come out of this. Just as you saw that one trait for the Reaper scaled the hell out of its Condi capabilities as a class, you might see a lot more torment coming from Rev now. I would not just throw this to the side instantly. I'm curious to see where the really deep build craft comes from. I think if there's any like really cool build craft you can do out of this patch, it's probably right here with the Condi Rev stuff, which I am super, super excited about. So that's Revenant, and they've had a bunch of other little changes as well, guys. Absolutely. As always, there's a link in the description if you want to check it out. Next, let's move on to Thief. Thief, funnily enough, had a lot of shortbow changes, and shortbow is, like, from everything considered, I think one of the most pure, interesting, well-designed, well-crafted, well-placed weapons in all of Guild Wars 2. I think the design of shortbow on Thief is really, really well done. But so this is what the devs say at the top. They say that the staff functions as a fairly strong AoE weapon, but the core Thief lags good ways to deal with large groups. So in this update, we're tuning up the shortbow to be a stronger ranged AoE weapon. Additionally, we're making a small change to Unload, which is your pistol, making it more effective as a damage tool when you can ensure that your target will stand still. Finally, we're also looking at updates to Deadly Arts that emphasize poison use to help establish more defined ways to play based on the traits that you select. So I think this essentially means that Condi Thief, which was really starting to gain steam recently, will gain even more steam here because they've helped to solidify Deadly Arts. I believe that Thief now has a trait which increases the potency of all the poison in the Deadly Arts line. Yeah, potent poison, in addition to its previous effects, which is wild. As to the shortbow changes, most interestingly, there's now another bomb that comes out of the cluster bomb, the skill 2 that you can spam, which already was amazing at cleaving bodies, for example. That's now got an entire extra bomb that comes out, which is brilliant. But also we see some Guild Wars 1E style stuff here. Choking gas. So that's the 4, right? So they've increased the damage. That really doesn't mean anything. The damage was basically nothing anyway. I always assumed the packet of damage on that was just to break you out of stealth rather than to have any meaningful use. But listen to this. If choking gas hits someone with 5 or more stacks of poison, then as the poison field pulses, it will daze them every time, but they can't be dazed more than once every second. So if you use your initiative to double or triple cast the choking gas, you won't just, you won't spam it too much. But that's just like Guild Wars 1 choking gas, which was a ranger thing. So it's now over here on the Thief. I think that's awesome though. Very, very interesting. And again, that's going to be curious to see how people try and maintain high stacks of poison to then also get crazy CCs out of that field. Fun stuff, definitely. As to the pistol gunslinger stuff, we all want it to be stronger. You now, if everything of your unload hits, you get 2 initiative back. And you guys who play that will know more than well enough that initiative is the big thing that holds unloading off. So as long as you can hit it on someone who's immobilized or hit it on someone who's been knocked down or whatever, suddenly gunslinging could be a lot more viable. So again, all more really, really awesome stuff. Moving on, and last but not least, we have the Warrior. And the Warrior had some changes I'm pretty happy about too. You guys will know that I love more than anything else about Warrior axe gameplay. And well, there have been some substantial axe changes. So they say this, for the Warrior, we're looking to tone down some overperforming elements and tune up some underperforming ones. Berserker skills such as Arc Divider and Headbutt were providing too much power for their cast time, while Smash Baller, which was a trait, was just providing too much power overall. In terms of effects, we're looking at tuning up axe skills and their synergy with other weapons. The axe mastery trait has been changed to be friendlier to builds that don't use 2 axes at once, and several of the axe skills have been tuned up to provide more consistent damage during combat. I'm so happy with this. So Shield Bash got a slight nerf. Let's just move straight on to the axe stuff, right? So if you're running axe offhand, your axe 4 will actually give you quickness now, a little bit like that ranger trait we were talking about earlier. So there's now quickness available on this set, which is great for landing eviscerates and stuff, and is absolutely fun. Eviscerate and decapitate, the burst skills for the axe. These now give you might, which I'm not really that excited about. I just want to see them become a bit more spiky. Maybe if the might is applied before the strike, then thus basically buffing the damage you'll get off more consistently from using the F1. Maybe that would be more interesting to me. But then just the regular skills. Listen to this. Increase the damage per strike of double chop by 7%, of triple chop by 7%. Cyclone Axe now gives you fury, so that's the 2. In addition to giving vulnerability, the vulnerability has gone up. The Thrown Axe is doing 27% more damage, so you can chase people down better now, and you get quickness if you're running it on the offhand. It's wild. Then also, think about Axe offhand here, guys, and you know you've got the Axe 5, which spins you around and is a well finisher. There's actually a kind of a subtle buff to that as well in a very interesting trait change here. Powerful Synergy. So, those of you who are unfamiliar with Powerful Synergy, it's a bit of a joke trait that it's been very unfortunate for Warrior ever since it sort of came into existence. So it used to be before this patch, Powerful Synergy was whenever you activate a leap combo, it will activate twice. So, like, it's kind of a fun idea, and I like things that fundamentally change the way you look at existing systems, like, you know, the combo field system. So, with Powerful Synergy, if you leap through a water field, you heal yourself twice. Or if you leap through a fire field, you put out 2 fire auras, which don't stack duration anyway. Okay, that's kind of crap. So, this wasn't too interesting. However, it's changed this patch to not just be whenever you activate a leap combo finisher, it's any combo will trigger, you'll get 2 for 1. We'll do it twice. That is crazy. That is so cool. All right, so you can double blast. If you've got a banner and you land a banner in a fire field, you're now blasting twice, or you're blasting a water field twice, or you're doing anything you want twice. And again, thinking about axe offhand, this means that if you're spinning in a fire field, for example, instead of just getting 3 little whirls that go off and do condi damage or whatever, you're actually getting 6 now as you spin, and you'll get 6 again and 6 again and 6 again every second. So I think this is really, really curious. And again, there's some very interesting buildcraft that might come out of that, just because of that change to Powerful Synergy there. Also, another change that I loved with Warrior was that the duration of Defy Pain, which is your free, easy cheese, stupid invulnerability, has been halved in PvP, and I could not be happier. That is one of my most detested traits in the entire game. PvE and World vs. World people don't have to worry too much, but I'm very, very happy that Defy Pain had its duration halved. I think that is awesome. And Endure Pain too, the actual activated one. So there you go, guys. That's the balance. Then they do a huge bit on the list. I will not go through all of this. This is maybe deserving of a video of its own, and we've been talking for the greater part of an hour already. They've done a ton of stuff to do with sigils in PvP, as I explained. So there's all the sigils have basically been completely changed. We have World vs. World. They've updated the Laurel Vendor. They changed Tactivators and Supply Depots a little bit to be a bit more easy to interact with. And of course, with all these patches, we've also got some gem store changes. So there's a new type of Black Lion kit that came in. There's new Hounds of Balthazar mail carriers. There's the Balthazar outfit has come back. And I believe there's a new set of weapons. They're called keepsake weapons, which are the new Black Lion things that are available there. So lots of cool stuff going on. What do you guys think about the balance patch? Let's try and keep it civil. I feel like the times where the Guild Wars 2 community is most unreasonable and ridiculous are the times of balance patches. Let's keep an open mind. Is there something I missed that you guys are particularly irked by or you really liked? Let me and everyone else see that down in the comments below. And I hope you guys enjoyed the story video of today, and I'll see you very shortly. Have a good one, guys.